For state history today, we're on page 21, early settlement. Page 21, early settlement. Remember, this is not required for you to do this, although it's fun for you to do the pages, but it is required for you to listen to these videos because this is important information for your 4th grade year about your state history. And hey, it's shorter than a history class, so there's that. Now we're going to be on page 21 of your books, and I think I've told you this already, but a lot of my information that I get is from kids.ct.gov. If you look up Connecticut Project Helper, you will find this PDF that we normally use. I'm on page 17 and 18. If you want to go there and you can follow along if you're on the Project Helper. And then we're going to do page 21 today, okay? So let's talk about Connecticut history, the colonial era. The first Europeans to land on Connecticut shores were Dutch traders. In 1614, Adrian Block traveled along the Long Island Sound. He entered the Connecticut River and explored it at least as far as present-day Hartford. The place where he landed is still called Adrian's Landing today. Leaving Long Island Sound, he charted Block Island, which is named for him, and Block set up some colonies in Connecticut on land purchased from the Pequot tribe and made permanent settlements. One of the first is present-day Windsor. Have you guys heard of Windsor before? Windsor, Connecticut. Then came English settlers from the Massachusetts Bay Colony, exploring through the Connecticut Valley area. They were impressed with the beauty of the countryside and decided to stay. It was in the town of Wethersfield that they planted the first crop. In 1636, one of the most famous early Connecticut settlers, Reverend Thomas Hooker, you guys have heard of him, traveled from Massachusetts with a group of colonists, and they founded the town of Hartford, which soon became an important center of government and trade. Many of the settlers brought land along the river from the Mohegan Indians. By 1637, trouble began between the settlers and the Pequot Indians. The Indians wanted to take lands that had been purchased from the Mohegans. In that year, Captain John Mason led the colonists to victory over the Pequots. Sounds like I'm saying peacocks. Because they wanted to create a plan for the type of government they wanted, Thomas Hooker, John Haynes, and Roger Ludlow wrote a document which has been called the first written constitution. And this is the fundamental orders of Connecticut. Many historians have said that this was the basis for the United States Constitution. It was adapted in 1639 by freemen of Hartford, Wethersfield, and Windsor. At the same time, the first governor, John Haynes, was chosen. So if you are listening, some of the first settlements we have are Hartford, Wethersfield, and Windsor. By 1660, the colonists had become uneasy about their legal standing with England. The colonies were still under English rule then, but there were many disagreements about land claims. Governor John Winthrop went to England in 1662 to talk to King Charles II. He returned with a royal charter. This document was important because it gave the colony a legal basis and approval of the king, which we talked about the other day. The colony continued to grow peacefully for the next 20 years, but more and more that the colonists were unhappy about the rule of England. They became afraid that they would lose their charter and their lands. England was far away, and colonists decided they wanted their own government, future, and way of life. In October of 1687, the English governor, Sir Edmund Andros, do you remember hearing about him, who had been appointed by King James, came to Connecticut to take away the charter and the colonists' legal rights. A large assembly was called to discuss the situation, and the charter was put on a table. Then suddenly someone put out the candles, and in the darkness the charter was taken away. Captain Wadsworth of Hartford is credited with taking the charter and placing it in a hollow spot in a large oak tree. This tree became known as the Charter Oak. Now, by 1765, we're talking about the Revolutionary War now, many of the Connecticut colonists were unhappy with English rule, but they could not vote in the English Parliament. Those people who believed that England should continue to rule the colonies, they were called Tories, and those people who wanted the American colonies to govern themselves were called Whigs. Many fights broke out between these two groups. More and more people began to agree with the Whigs. In 1765, the English Parliament passed a law called the Stamp Act. And you guys know and are familiar with the Stamp Act. This law said the American colonies would have to pay an official seal or stamp, as they were called, placed on all printed documents like deeds, licenses, and newspapers. Newspapers included the Connecticut Gazette of New Haven, the colony's first newspaper, and the Connecticut Hartford Courant, the oldest American newspaper in continuous existence. Because the act affected so many people and placed such a heavy tax burden on them, they got angry. And you remember they put a tax on goods, and this angered them. And remember what they did? They had the Boston Tea Party. Tea back then was important to them as it was for coffee. So imagine how your parents and how I would feel if all of a sudden they put this unreasonable tax on every cup of coffee we drank, and they said, all right, I mean, there's already tax on coffee, but imagine if they said, okay, you're going to have to pay an extra $5 for each coffee. We would all go up in arms and say, what in the world? I would have I don't know if I would throw my my coffee over the harbor, though, because my coffee is valuable to me. But, anyways, let's keep going. I'm skipping some of this if you're following along, because this is a lot of, reading. Well, as soon as the news of the uprising at Lexington, Massachusetts in April 1775 reached Connecticut, several thousand militiamen left Connecticut to Massachusetts. They were under the command of Colonel Israel Putnam from Pomfret. Soon promoted to general, it was General Putnam who said at the Battle of Bunker Hill, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." In 1776, Samuel Huntington, Roger Sherman, William Williams, hey, Titus, I wonder if it's any relationship, but William Williams, what a name, and Oliver Wolcott signed the Declaration of Independence for Connecticut. Most Connecticut citizens supported it, but not all. In that same year, a young Connecticut patriot, Nathan Hale, was captured by the British while on a spy mission for General Washington. Before he was executed, what were his famous words? "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." You may see the statue of Nathan Hale at the state capitol building. One major Revolutionary War battle was fought in Connecticut. This was in New London. On September 6, 1781, British forces under Benedict Arnold, the traitor, landed at New London on the banks of the Thames River. They captured Fort Griswold and burned many buildings in the town. Perhaps Connecticut's greatest contribution to the war was the fact that it furnished many supplies to the Continental Army. To General Washington, Connecticut was the provision state. Items supplied included beef, salt, flour, and gunpowder. So we're going to talk about one of our little early settlements. Our settlements were, we talked about Wethersfield and Windsor and Hartford, but we're going to actually talk about the fort today. So for this, you can cut out a piece of page 18, Fort Griswold, and glue that to the top. You can say, what's the name of the important place? It is Fort Griswold. And when did it become important? It became important on September 6, 1781. September 6, 1781. What helped to make it an important place? George Washington and the Continental Army during the War for Independence. And you can put whatever wording you want, but it was during the War for Independence. Why is this place important to your state? This place is important to our state because this is where we got one of our nicknames, the Provision State, from, because in this historical landmark, we provided supplies, beef, salt, flour, and gunpowder to the soldiers during the War for Independence, or the Revolutionary War. So this is what you could put down for page 21, our early settlement of Fort Griswold. All right, hope you learned something from today. And if you're doing your page, awesome job. I hope you're having fun. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about some historical figures, some of our historical figures. I'm excited to learn about some of them. All right, have a great day.